My CGI guy is like, oh, I read the scene. It sounds like astral projection. This gets an astral projection scene. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that is. What is astral projection?
Hey folks, Brian Smith here with Dream Path Podcast, where we get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. Today we talk to Onur Tukel. Onur is a New York-based actor, screenwriter, producer, and director. He is also a novelist, a graphic novelist, a musician, and a children's book author. And we'll talk about that later on in the interview. But we're not here to talk about his children's books. We're here to talk about his movies, in particular, his most recent film, Scenes from an Empty Church, starring Kevin Corrigan, Max Casella, Thomas J. Ryan, and Paul Reiser, among others. And this film covers or follows two priests in the pandemic as they are trying to balance the need to stay safe and quarantine with also the need to have human connection and to help their parishioners and friends have human connection. And it's funny, it's heartfelt, it doesn't take itself too seriously, it's farcical sometimes, but for the most part, it is just a really solid drama/comedy, and it was a lot of fun. So go check it out. It's on video on demand right now. And you can check out his other films. Onur is a prolific filmmaker. He wrote and directed Applesauce, a movie called Catfight with Heache and Sandra Oh. He is quite a character. He is very charismatic. He's super funny. He was kicked off of a podcast by Doug Benson twice, and he tells the story on this interview. And what you'll notice is that this interview goes actually a lot longer than most of my interviews. And the reason for that is that we had a lot to talk about, and I just didn't want to stop talking. I didn't want to stop asking him questions. And he was very generous with his time. So we had a deep connection about a lot of things. And I really look forward to hearing from folks after they watch or listen to this interview about what they think about Onur Tukel and his work specifically, because he has a lot of films out there, and some of them are kind of controversial. They're not mainstream films. Some of them are considered more art films, but he is a very talented, funny guy. And if you want to see his acting work, you can check him out on an episode of Room 104, not Room 24, which is on HBO Max. It's one of Mark Duplass's projects. But this is a wide-ranging conversation, and the first 15 minutes of this interview, he's actually interviewing me, and I left that in as bonus content for the YouTube channel. I did not leave that in for the audio-only version. So if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, you are getting the full, unabridged version of this chat with Onur Tukel, which I think is pretty special. And I hope to follow his projects in the future. That there's a movie called That Cold Dead Look in Your Eyes that's coming out pretty soon. It's a French film that looks like maybe French noir. It looks really compelling. And he's just got other really interesting projects in the works. And I think Onur Tukel is one of these guys who is going to turn 50 next year. I think that he is going to be one of the most interesting, powerful, sought-after filmmakers over the course of the next 20 years, because he really cut his teeth doing interesting work over the last 20 or so. But he's really found his element with this movie, Scenes from an Empty Church. So without further ado, let's jump into my chat with the immensely talented and prolific Onur Tukel.
How are you?
I'm doing well. First, I am embarrassed to ask you this question, but I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked.
How to pronounce my name properly?
How to pronounce your name, yes.
Yeah, you can pronounce it Onur Tukel. You can pronounce it Onur Tukel. You can pronounce it Onur, like my friend Paul Papadeus, my Greek friend, says it. That's like the Turkish way to say it. Uh-huh. My friends north of the Mason-Dixon line usually say Onur. My southern friends say Onur. And okay. The only thing that I get annoyed about, because I don't care how anyone says my first name, is the last name, because so many people pronounce it Turkel or Turkel. They think there's an R there, and it's Tukel.
Tukel with the accent over the E.
Yeah, Tukel. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Not
Great.
Tukel. Yeah, not Tukel. Tukel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
All
So,
right. Now that we got that out of the way, that's actually they created anxiety for me. I don't know why I have anxiety about name pronunciation because my name is Brian Smith,
yeah.
so no one ever messes that up. But anyway,
Onur is it's like the equivalent of Brian in Turkey. In Turkish, Onur is a very popular name. I don't know if it's the equivalent of Brian, but it's a very popular name. I have a friend named Brian Smith who's a screenwriter who I put in my movie Blackmagic for White Boys. Really cool guy. Yeah, Brian Smith's a great name. It's
oh,
like
right
I'll
on,
always remember Brian Smith just because Brian Smith is my friend. So
right on.
I have two Brian Smith friends now. So we'll see how this goes. We'll see if we're friends by the end of it.
Right.
I have a habit of like sometimes I'll get into trouble with podcasts, but I'm sure this will be fine. You seem like very. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your deal?
Yeah. Well, I am a trial lawyer by day, so I sue the Catholic Church. I represent survivors of sexual assault and abuse.
Oh wow.
And these clients of mine were abused as children, but they're adults now and just now coming to terms with what happened to them. And in a lot of states, there's leeway in terms of the deadline to sue on the statute of limitations
Yeah.
because of the trauma that happens as a child. It's so overwhelming. They can't even come to grips with it and deal with it until they're adults. And so what we're seeing right now is a bunch of lawsuits against the church. It's kind of a reckoning happening for a lot of abuse that was covered up for decades.
Yeah.
And so I do that nationally. I have cases out of New York and California, and I'm based in Washington State. But I'm also a musician. You can see
Yeah.
in
No,
the
for
background
sure.
the guitars. And I saw your episode of Room 104 where you play guitar, so I know you have
Yeah.
some.
I got my wall of I got a classical guitar, my Yamaha. I got my banjo and ukulele here hanging on the wall.
Right
Right here
on.
for something. Yeah, I just got a keyboard the other day with weighted keys, so I'm looking forward to getting back into piano. Yeah, you got a nice collection there. Well,
Yeah, I
that's
got
great.
the
But
banjo ukulele as well, right behind me.
oh, nice. Yeah, no, that's a really nice collection you got there, and that's great work that you're doing. What are the average ages like of these kids? Like, is it like a one time thing, or is it like did it happen to them over years of being in the Catholic Church, or was I mean, I guess it's just so many different
Yeah,
stories and whatnot. Yeah.
it just runs the gamut. I have over 100 clients in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and their age now is anywhere from in their 40s through their 70s,
Hmm.
and so they were abused decades ago. Their experiences range from a one-time touching over the clothes to
Hmm.
years of horrific rape. And there's pedophile priests that have been criminally convicted in New Mexico, and the same is true in Pennsylvania and New York. And New York opened up its statute of limitations to try to deal with this all at the same time because there's so many victims and really not a great mechanism for achieving justice, if you can even call it that. I mean, money in exchange for this type of abuse is not a justice, but it's a semblance of justice. And so, yeah,
What,
that's a,
what 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 is the statute of limitations? Does it vary from state to state? You said there wasn't. There is not a statute of limitation. There is a statute of limitations.
there is a statute of limitations in every state, but New York opened theirs up and they created what's called a window statute that allowed people to come forward for a full year after the law was passed. And it was basically like, come forward. There's no barrier to you filing the lawsuit. We're not going to be able to say you're too late. And so,
Oh, it could have happened 40 years. You could be a 60-year. It could be a 50-year-old man, and it happened to you 40 years ago when you were 10, and you could come forward, right?
exactly.
Oh,
And so that happened in New York. It happened in California in terms of the law opening up the statute of limitations. And there are certain states that are just shut down completely. A lot of the southern states like Georgia, Arkansas, that there's very little leeway to sue if you're an adult. And
hmm,
it's a shame because people, when they're kids, they usually don't tell anybody. They're threatened not to tell. They'll go to hell if they do, that type of thing.
yeah.
So it's, yeah, that's my practice during the day. And then just to get away from that darkness, I started this podcast, basically.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. How long have you been
And
doing this?
since early 2019. And I went to Sundance Film Festival as just a, ticket holder, basically. And I talk about this on a few episodes of my podcast, the origin story of how it all came together. But one of my friends knew somebody who had a film at Sundance who ended up winning an Academy Award, and her name is Heache, the filmmaker, and she put together a film called Period End of Sentence, which is a 22-minute Netflix film. It might still be on Netflix, about providing feminine hygiene products, pads and tampons
Oh
to
yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
rural villages in India, and she won an Academy Award for that. And so that was my second guest on the show. I had a connection to her and flew down to Los Angeles for that. This was before the pandemic. And from there, it's kind of an organic process. It's hard to describe, but I started making connections, and it kind of snowballed into a situation where I was flying all over the country before the pandemic anyway, doing these interviews just for fun, just because out of natural curiosity. I'm a writer. I'm a musician. I love film. One of these days I want to, get involved in possibly financing films. And here we are, now doing these by Zoom now, but I'm starting to do more face-to-face stuff, traveling more.
So this is about getting inspired then, right? Learning more about it and getting more confident about learning the process, and maybe trying this yourself one day, writing,
Absolutely.
directing, producing. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's kind of like cracking the code.
Yeah.
What it's such a black box, Hollywood is, and the indie film industry. How does this get made? How do they do it? And excuse me, it's just super inspiring for me. So I thought, put it in podcast form. Maybe others would be inspired by it. And so far it's worked out okay.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, for sure, man. I don't know if there's a formula, you know what I mean, that you could use in terms of, it's just a matter of figuring it out and finding your own kind of process. I guess the formula changes every time you make a film. That's exciting and cool. Do you feel like you, so when you say you're a writer, did you write songs, or you also write prose, you write poetry, you write scripts? What kind of things?
I have multiple screenplays that are in progress that I haven't finished yet. And I don't know if it's a writer's block thing, I'm just afraid of being judged and having my work seen. And, that might be an issue. I write songs. I used to play in a band. I have, you're talking about the weighted keyboard. I have that right in front of me right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of my escape into a space that I'm not constantly playing in a loop, the anxieties of the day, the pressures of everything.
Yeah.
And
to escape.
Yeah. And this for me is, I interview poets, I interview painters, anybody who, for me is, and this has turned into an interview of me, which is fine. But
no, absolutely. I love it.
But for me, the folks that inspire me are the people that jump headfirst into their creative space and they commit to it without a backup plan. And it's not to say I don't interview folks that have a backup plan or a day job or something like that, but it's just awe-inspiring to see people like you. I mean, you're in New York, you're making films, and you are prolific in the work that you're doing in acting and directing and writing. And it's hard. It has to be just really, really hard and scary to not,
Yeah, go ahead. To not what?
To not know where your next job is going to be, whether
sure.
this is going to land, am I going to get paid?
There's so much to unpack there. So and feel free to jump in anytime, because I'll just start rambling forever about this. It gets harder as you get older, in the sense of being kind of like very, very independent, trying to track down independent financiers, not pitching your projects to studios and streaming services. I mean, there's so many services, there's so much film out there. TV shows and stuff being made, so many avenues to try to get your work financed. But then you have to make concessions because you have teams of people normally in suits who are giving you notes, and they have to dictate what the themes are and what you can and can't say or do. And I have a big mouth and I like to say things. I don't like people telling me what to do or say, right? But the scary thing is, as you get older, it's like, what am I doing? Where is my security really? Like, how long can I keep doing this? And what is it all for? Because I'm proud of the work that I do, but it doesn't really get seen. It never really makes any money. I've only had a couple of movies who've made money, and I've made 10 movies in the last 10 years in New York, 9 movies in the last 10 years in New York. Only 2 of them have made money. And it's difficult because, I do work. I do have a backup plan. There's always been a backup plan. My plan is, if everything fell through, I would continue to work as an editor and a motion designer because that's what I do. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I make a living. And I bought a place in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, 12 years ago. And if everything blew up in my face in New York, and I expect it's going to in a day now, the goal would be to go back to North Carolina and maybe, start a production company there or do editing, freelance editing there, because there's so many gigs and jobs. So there's always that, and that's always there. But for some reason, I'm always able to find someone who's able to give me a little bit of money to make my strange, weird, twisted movies that I want to make. Not so much Scenes from an Empty Church was trying to go in a different direction from my normal work. I don't know if you've seen anything besides Scenes from an Empty Church, but my work is usually pretty dark and cynical and twisted and very contrarian to what's in the culture. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you say, don't talk about this, I want to talk about that. Don't say this, I want to say that. And I'm going to make a movie actually in the fall. The last 2 movies that I've made, The Scenes from an Empty Church and a movie that I have coming out in the fall, they're just kind of detours from what I normally do. I like to criticize the culture and make fun of the culture. And I'm going to get back to that in the fall and winter with this project that I'm doing. But, we have very, very little money. I had a bunch of investors lined up, ready to write me a check. I had a meeting. I had a bunch of investors are like, Onur, you're so good in a room. You're so good at pitching. And, I have a lot of confidence in that regard. Not trying to raise millions of dollars. We're talking about, $80,000, $90,000, $120,000. And I'm pretty good about getting that kind of money. And, but I've been wanting to say something very specific that's very, very bold and brave. And it's going to piss some people off, but look, some things have to be said, right? To try to find a greater truth in a way. Right. And then we can get back to that in terms of Scenes from an Empty Church, why we chose to say certain things and didn't say certain things regarding, priests and abuse. We wanted to, we'll get to that, obviously. You know what I mean? I'd like to talk about those things, but that's also your work. And I think that's fascinating. I want to talk about the creative process as well. But but these investors were all about writing me a check until I told them what the subject matter of this new movie was. And they're like, listen, we love you. You're great in a room, but we can't invest in this. But then you find 2 investors who are like, you know what? The chances that this is going to make money are very small, but none of your other films have made any money. So why not? Why don't we do this? I mean, there is that chance that maybe there'll be a bold distributor out there or a film festival bold enough to show this movie. And look, after insipid and vapid movies like The Human Centipede that IFC released, what's sacred anymore? What can or can't be allowed? Which I thought, in terms of a horror film, the absolute terror, the terror of like the idea of it works as a horror film when you just think about what it's about, The Human Centipede. Mm-hmm. But then again, it's not a good movie. So it's like, give me that idea, but you make a good movie and I'll be into it. I thought the second one was way better than the first. I didn't watch the third one, but I'm not going in that territory. I'm more going into something a little bit more, hopefully more intellectual, more about ideas and not just about visceral, trying to gross someone out with something visceral and disgusting and scatological. Although this new movie is kind of scatological.
Are you talking about the cold dead look in your eyes or something else?
Oh, no, that's different. The next thing I'm going to do in the fall, the cold dead look in your eyes, French experimental, kind of abstract, homoerotic sci-fi movie about which is kind of existential. We take some risk there. We do take some risk, but I don't think it's going to offend. It's not offensive. It's not meant to provoke. It's meant to provoke. It's a mystery. It's a puzzle for the audience to solve. I usually don't have a lot of subtext in my movies. All the text is right on the surface. It's pretty easy to follow my movies. But with that cold, dead look in your eyes, it is kind of a puzzle that we want people to solve. And I don't think it's not going to piss anyone off. It might frustrate people. People might hate it, but I think people are going to like it too. But no, the new one is I don't want to demystify it, talk about it too soon. But yeah, it's just about the culture that we're in and the vitriolic kind of fractured state of discourse that's there, and all information overload and everybody talking at each other. And I know about those things because I tend to talk at people too. You know what I mean? So, but it's cool. It's like it's good to be inspired. Like I'm inspired. I still want to make things at the age of 49. I'm going to turn 50 next year, and I'm thinking, how much longer can I do this? How much longer can I make these tiny budget independent films that no one really sees? I get criticized a lot from friends and colleagues who believe in me, and they think that I can make bigger projects with bigger budgets. And I try to get some of that stuff made. I try to, I've got a couple of bigger projects, but it takes time, and I like to work. I like the process. I'm excited about it. I've been in New York for 10 years, and I'm here, to make films and or music or whatever. I've been making a lot of music lately too, which I really fucking love. I
That's
love music.
awesome.
So yeah. But there is a fear. There's this fear mainly of, God damn, what am I doing with my life? What have I done with my life? I could have maybe gone to LA 10 or 12 years ago and tried to get in the game, try to penetrate the industry and pitch things, because I've got a lot of ideas. I've got a lot of marketable ideas. And I didn't do that. I chose instead to just become this kind of underground outsider artist. And in the sense of having a body of work that I'm proud of, I think I've accomplished something. I'm successful in that regard. But, I have these insecurities as I get older about the sacrifices I've made, like choosing not to have a family or not get married and to live a life of a single bohemian who has very low overhead, so that I can keep doing these kind of projects that, that are an expression of who I am, So it's difficult, but at the same time, being single, not having kids, it's very easy to take care of yourself if you're relatively healthy. You know what I mean? So I feel lucky in that regard. And I think about things like money, and like if the wheels were to come off, and even during the COVID, when a lot of my freelance gigs dried up, I'm like, well, I'm not making the kind of money I was making before, but then again, I don't have any mouths to feed, just myself. So
yeah.
Are you married? Are you married or seeing what's your?
I'm married
status?
with 3 adult daughters.
Oh wow!
Yeah, 20,
oh man, that was all.
23, and I've got a grandbaby living with me right now. So
oh my God, that's amazing! 3 daughters. What's the ages?
So 20, 23, and almost 30, and my middle child has a baby that they're both living with me right now. And I'm your age. I'm 49. So
19, you had your first child at 19?
No, so 21, I got together with my wife, who had a child from a previous relationship. So she's my stepdaughter, who's almost 30. And then we had 2 children together.
Wow.
So it's quite a challenge to, juggle family, podcast, work, all of those things. But I hear you on those choices, because every choice that you make to go in a certain direction is conversely a choice to not go in a different direction. And it is absolutely a sacrifice to, live in a bohemian lifestyle to support, your film habit, if that's the way you want to put it.
Yeah.
But then you're giving up. And also, I think rather than state this as just to make a statement about it, let me ask you a question. Do you think living in New York is a sacrifice versus LA because it is more of an art film town as opposed to, Hollywood town, where you have, like you were saying, all these connections to studio executives?
Yeah, if I lived in LA, here's the thing. You have more access, I think, to actors that means something when it comes to getting something financed. You know what I mean? I think in a way you have a benefit of living in LA, I think. I've never lived out there. I've visited, I don't think if I lived in LA or New York, I think I'd still be doing the same thing. I'd be trying to make movies one a year or one every couple of years. But I think I would, because I know some actors who are a little bit more recognizable out there, I probably would play the game. I would try to package movies. I would try to write a script, find my actor friends who are somewhat of note, and package them, put them, get them attached to the project. I would go to studios and I would pitch. I've never pitched anyone in my life in terms of a studio. I pitch investors all the time. I don't know. I just think it would be different. I don't like to drive so much. I mean, I like to drive like road trips. I don't like to drive on a daily basis in the city, and I don't like being stuck in traffic. Right. So in that sense, that's probably why I'm not on the West Coast. Also, I was born on the East Coast. I have family in North Carolina and Florida. I don't know. I'm just an East Coast kind of guy. I like the cold weather. I like the mountains. I mean, I know all that stuff's in California as well. But for me, I just always loved New York. I've always been beholden to New York. I've always romanticized New York. And when I lived in North Carolina, in movies and in the books I read, it's just that New York was always kind of my town. Every time I visited it, I connected with the energy of the streets and the people here, because we're all jammed in together. And I like my solitude, and I like to be alone, and I like to work. But there was something about the frenzied energy of the streets of New York and the people here that I always connected with. It's also a lot of bars here. I like to drink. I don't drink quite like I used to, And LA, just something about it being spread out. I mean, when I've visited LA, I've had a blast. But it feels like, I don't know, maybe I'd be more cloistered, or maybe I'd stick to my apartment or my house, and I wouldn't go out as much. I don't know,
Yeah.
But I haven't thought about it. Look, I've never done the agent thing, the manager thing. No one's ever approached me. I've never actually actively tried to seek management. I had a manager for my acting for a while. But yeah, that was cool. He got me a lot of auditions and stuff. And
yeah. So let's go back to North Carolina days. You grew up in North Carolina, and it wasn't, the weirdest town I can think of, or the most artsy town I can think of in North Carolina is Asheville. Yeah. So how far away, or how artsy was your town?
I grew up in a very small southern town called Taylorsville, North Carolina. It was about an hour and a half from Asheville, but I never went to Asheville growing up. It was a very small southern town, Southern Baptist town, I should say. Baptist, lots of religion, very, very, conservative religion, but also very, very cool. I would call them like conservative, like hippies, I guess. You know what I mean? It was in the foothills, very beautiful pastoral rolling hills and beautiful weather. And, but it was great. Like my parents were immigrants. They came here from Turkey, and they were welcomed with open arms in Taylorsville, North Carolina. We were always accepted. I mean, my dad was a doctor, so he had that thing going for you. You know what I mean? There's a status that you get when you're the doctor's kids, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, it was a great experience. I have dear friends who, from Taylorsville, one of my best friends I used to make movies with, he got me into making films. My friend Kirk, he manages the Bowery Hotel, which is like a 7-minute walk from my apartment in New York. Bowery Hotel is a really trendy, cool hotel in New York. So, my roots of making films started in Taylorsville, North Carolina, in the 8th grade, making a VHS horror film called Camp Out with Death. The summer of 2000. VHS. I don't know. Yeah, VHS. I guess it was. Nice. I was born in 72, so it might have been 84, 85. Slasher films were big. We loved slasher films. We watched them all the time. My friend Kirk Wilson, I'll never forget it. He walked up to me in middle school and said, "We're going to make a horror film with Paul Chung's video camera, and it's going to be called Camp Out with Death." It was just that concept. It was very Roger Corman-esque. I mean, because it was just the title itself and the sleazy, trashy nature of it. And at that moment, I was like, "That sounds amazing, but how is that possible?" And then, sure enough, we spent the summer shooting this fun slasher film that's that exists on VHS somewhere, and we edit it in camera, shoot everything in sequence. Any of the music that was part of the scene is diegetic music or not. Yeah, diegetic. I don't care. I always get those confused. Diegetic, non-diegetic. The music within the scene, if it's non-diegetic music is when it's not supposed to be actually in the scene, but it would be in the scene playing because we had no choice. You know
in
what
a
I mean?
Boombox somewhere?
Yeah, we'd have a boombox out there playing the horror score.
Nice.
That we would compose on our pianos. We composed the scary music, and we were rip-offs of like, Halloween, John Carpenter's score and stuff. So that stuff was a blast. And then we'd spend the next few years in high school and middle school just making silly, movies that were spoofs of whatever genres that we were into. We made breakdancing. We had breakdancing spoofs. We had horror films. We had sci-fi. It was fun. I mean, like it was a blast. And then when I got to college, I studied film and I studied graphic design because my mom was very pragmatic. And she said, look, study film, be a filmmaker. That's great. But always has something to fall back on, because she was very, she was just very practical about those things, because she knew it was tough. And she's like, look, if you can't make a living being a filmmaker, just have something else to fall back on. And so she encouraged me to be a graphic designer and editor. And so I double majored in film and journalism. There was a graphic design sequence in the journalism department at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in North Carolina. Great school, great public school,
Yeah. And so how did you make the leap into actually shooting your first film as a writer-director?
Yeah, so there were a lot of films being made in North Carolina in the late 80s and early 90s, and still to this day. It's, I think the terrain and stuff like that. You got mountains, you got the beach, you got the city, Charlotte and Raleigh, you got the cities and stuff. So I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a little coastal town about 2.5 hours where I went to college. And there was a lot of production there, although I never got into production there. I just went there thinking I would get into the production there. There was a show called Dawson's Creek that was shooting there in the 90s. Blue Velvet was shot there in the late 80s. Lots of movies, a lot of amazing films were shot there. I went there, and then I just waited tables and worked at a local TV station as an editor and saved some money and made a movie. This was 1996, made a black and white 16 millimeter movie called House of Pancakes. I probably saved $6,000 or $7,000. My dad gave me a few thousand for a graduation present that I used. My friend Clifford McCurdy ended up putting like $3,000 of his own money in it. And we made this $10,000 feature film called House of Pancakes in 1996. And this was, I was very influenced by Kevin Smith's Clerks. I don't know if you know much about the 90s, kind of new wave of independent cinema. Whit Stillman, Richard Linklater, Robert Rodriguez, all those people I was like, very influenced by. So ended up making it. And I didn't know anything about film festivals. I didn't know anything about Sundance. I didn't really submit it anywhere. And it kind of found this distributor in New Jersey called EI Cinema that ended up releasing it on VHS. But that was a big deal in 96, to get a box of VHS tapes with a really cool fancy cover that was shrink wrapped they got it distributed. It got into a couple of Hollywood video stores, which was a chain back then, competing with Blockbuster. People would call me from Oregon or Seattle or the Midwest and say that they would see copies of my movie on the shelves, which was very exciting. Getting interviews and getting a little press and in weird underground film magazines. All that stuff was very fun and very inspiring for a 24-year-old kid out of college who I thought he wanted to. I did and thought I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I was really inspired for about 6 years in Wilmington to make movies. I ended up convincing some people a few years later to give me $15,000 to make a vampire film called Drawing Blood. I ended up selling that to a company called Troma in New York. This is when my real love affair with New York began, because Troma was a little, Lloyd Kaufman, Michael Hurst, they've been the Toxic Avenger and all these crazy, they make all these crazy, weird kind of contrarian movies in the 80s and 90s, which were really fun and bloody and ridiculous and cheap and fantastic. And we love Troma. I still really respect Troma. But yeah, we sold the movie to them in the mid-90s and got our investors their money back, late 90s, and then got our investors their money back. And then we got some investors to invest in a bigger budgeted movie called Ding-a-ling-Less.
Oh, I heard about that one.
Yeah, Ding-a-ling-Less is cool. Ding-a-ling-Less was kind of the movie that I thought was going to put me on the map. It was my first real heartbreak, We made this beautiful movie that was on 35 millimeter with a great tiny budget, but it looks like a $2 million movie. Everyone who saw it, it blew their minds. So funny, so original. It's actually more relevant now than it was 20 years ago. It's about sexuality. It's about gender identity. It's about masculinity. It's about having your masculinity challenged. It's about homophobia. It's about Me Too sins of treating women with misogynistically and like in the sins of your past coming back to haunt you. It's a fantastic movie and still holds up. It's got a gentleman named Robert Longstreet in it who's actually doing very well right now. He's going to be in the new Halloween Kills movie that's coming out. I don't know. You're probably not into horror films, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah,
you are?
Yeah.
He's on a show called Midnight Mass that was just released on Netflix. He's doing very well. Beautiful man. One of my really dear friends. And I met him in Wilmington. And so we made this movie and thought it was going to do so well. And we thought it was going to get into all these festivals. We thought it was going to get bought. We thought it was going to get distributed. And, so many companies would watch it and say, God, this is a great, great, great movie, but we can't release this. Like, and it really like, it was heartbreaking, but it was discouraging because everything I had read and learned about independent film up to that point was be brave, be bold, make something that no one else is doing and say something that no one else is brave enough to say. That's what independent film is supposed to be about, after all, because the corporations aren't going to say anything that challenging. All the Hollywood studios aren't going to say anything that, outrageous. I mean, they'll say things that are, relevant to politics or whatever, to human rights, which is good. They've always been good about that, but they won't say anything truly weird. I can't say they never do that. Of course, they make weird movies all the time. It was just it was a punch in the gut, and I lost a lot of confidence in the industry, and I stopped making movies for several years after that.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's too bad. I looked for that film. I couldn't find it easily. So, I tried to do a deep dive on your catalog, and I watched Catfight, Applesauce, the Ving Rhames short on YouTube that you acted in. And man, what a catalog you've put together. What a filmography.
Yeah, I'm really proud. I think I had a thing there where I did Summer of Blood, Applesauce, Catfight, Blackmagic for White Boys, and The Misogynist. I'm really proud of those 5 movies together. I don't think Catfight's my strongest movie, but it was definitely impressive with the cast and what we did for the money. And it got into the Toronto Film Festival, sold for a lot of money, which a lot of people don't know that. We premiered on a Friday, sold for 7 figures on a Saturday. I'm not saying I saw a lot of that money, you know what I mean? But I saw some of it. But it was very successful. But we weren't able to really promote that aspect of it because Netflix didn't want us to. There was something in the contract that said we couldn't. There could be a press release. But I've had a lot of luck, and I'm very grateful for being able to find financing and get movies made. And I'm proud that I've kind of stuck to my guns and tried to say things that were a little bit outspoken and crazy. It's discouraging because it's like you think the distributors are gonna come and embrace you and release your movies and say, look, this is a little bit different, a little off the beaten path. Hasn't happened that way, unfortunately, but there's still a few investors that I'll find who will, again, write me a check, But thank you for watching some of that stuff. I can send you a link to Ding-a-ling-Less. It's only exists on DVD. And one of the things I thought about doing is going and getting all the film, all the 35 millimeter film reels and transferring it all, getting it re-telecinied, which is like, scanned and everything to 4K and maybe re-editing it for streaming,
That'd be great.
It really still holds up. Yeah, my first 3 movies were shot on film, and I stopped making films for about a decade. And I decided to get back into it when I moved to New York because of these the Canon 7D camera, which is a really affordable $2,000 camera that came out in the 2010 or so or 2009. And for me, it just had a really cool film look. It looked more like film than anything up to that point, and was just small. It looked like a little 35 millimeter, still camera. And I thought, well, shit, maybe I can And there was the mumblecore movement that was happening, with Andrew Bajowski and all the mumblecore, the Duplass brothers, and all the films that were being made in the late 80s. So it was a new wave thing happening there. And I thought, well, maybe I can go to New York and start making movies again, because I'd always loved New York. I'd always thought it's always been a dream of mine to make movies in New York. And it's like, oh, now it's kind of possible, because you were seeing all these kind of weird New York low budget movies being made in New York. You know what I mean? With Mutual Appreciation, I think, was shot in New York. And I don't know if fun is. Maybe that was shot in Austin. But anyway, yeah, it was. I think Swanberg was making some films in New York at the time, and they were just so intimate and small, and they weren't very cinematic, but there was something about them that drew you in. And I was like, wow, I was inspired. So I made a movie called Richard's Wedding that was very much like inspired by mumblecore. And after that, I was like, well, that was cool, but I want to make things that are a little bit more genre oriented. It's more my style,
Right. Have you worked with the Blackmagic camera? I've heard a lot about that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. My DP on my French film, Eric LaPlanta, we shot with 2 FS7s, and then we did a lot of kind of a gimbal, like it's kind of like a Steadicam. It's kind of like a cheaper version of a Steadicam. It's a little bit easier to maneuver with. Mm-hmm. And we did some one camera stuff with that. And when we had the gimbal, we used his Blackmagic.
Nice.
And it looked amazing. Like we were able to really get some movement there on the camera, because it was necessary for some of the scenes, given a really kinetic, kind of chaotic kind of feel. But it's a beautiful camera. You couldn't really tell the difference when it was color corrected between what was the Blackmagic and the FS7. I love the FS7 as a camera. It might be my favorite camera. We shot Scenes from an Empty Church on a red camera. My friend Andrew Shemin was the DP, and I really loved the look of that too.
Oh,
we kept the camera landlocked. We get locked a lot of the time, and I just think it's got a really confident look, even though it was a crew of 5 people on set. We had an assistant camera person, a red camera, a sound guy, a couple of producers on set, and that was really it,
Yeah, well, that was pre-vaccine, right? I mean, you were shooting in the pandemic, pre-vaccine. So what were the protocols for doing that safely?
Well, there's the SAG, the union for actors, right? Screen Actors Guild. And they usually set rules and stuff that you have to follow if you have SAG actors, which we did. Almost all of our actors were SAG actors. A brilliant cast: Kevin Corrigan, Max Casella, Thomas J. Ryan, Craig Bierko, Natalie Carter. So SAG was still figuring out their protocols. Now I have producer friends who are making movies, and they have budgets of $300,000, $400,000, and the SAG protocols, all the different tests you have to get, like they're $250 a test for extras and for all this stuff, is adding another 10% to their bottom line, which is like another $30,000 or $40,000. Our budget was so minuscule, and SAG hadn't figured out the protocols yet. Everyone had to get tested before they shot. You know what I mean? I think now everyone has to get tested every other day or something, I believe.
Right.
Everyone had to get tested, and we had to have an on-set nurse or COVID specialist. I think it was a nurse at the time. Now there's actually a COVID specialist. You can get trained or go through some kind of orientation, who is checks people's temperatures and check, make sure everyone's feeling okay and safe and that kind of thing. I can't remember if we were supposed to get COVID tests every day. We didn't, you know what I mean? So we may have broken some of those rules, but everyone got tested before we only shot for 10 days, and everyone got tested, I think, at least twice, but it was I was angry, because I'm like, why? It's a crew of 6 people. We have 10 people in the cast, and there's only 2 to 3 actors on screen at one time. You're making everybody go to the clinics to get checked when they're going to be around. The chances of getting COVID are increased by having to go there.
Right.
So it was frustrating, but SAG is just trying to protect their union delegate, their members, I guess.
Yeah.
It was cool. We were all a little bit nervous. And that kind of stress, there's always low-level stress when you make a movie. But the actors, the characters in the movie are supposed to be a little bit stressed because of COVID. So, the actors were able to use the real stress that they were feeling to inform their characters a little bit,
Well, the uncertainty, too, about, Max's character, Paul, I think, where
That's right.
he's like, I'm not sick. I'm not sick. And why should I wear a mask? And his friend Andrew, is that who Father Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kevin
So
Corrigan.
in the it really captured so well the ambiguity of the situation, and what are the social protocols and the medical protocols? How do you navigate that? How do you balance the fact that we all need human connection, and this is a friend, you trust this friend, but of course now we know it doesn't matter if you trust them or not.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But you could see that in Kevin's character's eyes, about what do I do here? And so let's talk about that writing process. You obviously didn't start writing this until after the pandemic hit, because it's very pandemic focused and oriented. And how long did it take you to write it and get to production, get to actual filming?
I wrote it. I guess it was around. We knew that we had a church to shoot in the winter of 2019. My friend Andrew Shemin, who helped me co-write the story and who shot the movie and produced the movie, we were always going to make a movie in a church.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Because he has this beautiful Catholic church that we had access to, which is like, with independent film and just like real estate, location is everything. We don't have the money to have amazing. Sometimes I have the money to have decent production design. And when I have the money and I can afford it, I'll hire an amazing production designer like SD Braverman, who is a production designer on Misogynist, Blackmagic for White Boys, and Catfight. But in this case, we didn't have the money for production design or a designer. So it's like, okay, we have this beautiful church though. Anywhere you put the camera, it's just immaculate. It's beautiful. It's
the
resplendent.
lighting's great. Yeah.
Natural
lighting.
And it's like, we don't have a lot of lights. We don't have a lot of gear, and we don't have a lot of time to light things. So let's find something with beautiful lighting and that already looks great. And Andrew was like, we've got a church. Let's shoot in this church. And so we were always thinking about what we're going to make in the church. When the pandemic happened and we got shut down in March, we felt like, oh, let's do it now. Let's shoot in it, because that church, beautiful church on 34th Street in near Hell's Kitchen in New York, it was closed, so we could use it as long as we wanted. Father Rutler, who was the main priest at the time at that church, gave us his blessing. He was fantastic, and we had this amazing church to use. So I wrote a script called Sisters and Brothers in March that was way, way, way too ambitious. It was a group of priests, 7 or 8 priests who lived in this church. There was a COVID shutdown, and there was a nunnery with like 8 or 9 nuns, or like 10 or 11 nuns, a lot of nuns, right? A dozen nuns who their place. There's not COVID that's infecting this. It's something else. It's actually way worse. The disease that's happening in this movie kills you almost instantly. Like if you get it, you are going to die. It's way more terrifying. So these nuns, their nunnery is infected. Someone dies, and they actually have to. The place burns. They have to burn the place down, I think, because it's so infected. Something like that, where they have nowhere to stay. And it's about nuns and priests staying together during COVID, and like that was the script. You know what I mean? And all these things that happened during COVID. It's so different. And then they start like this podcast for people, or this video vlog so that people can actually experience, because that's not in that movie. I toyed with doing that, but I kind of avoided it. And people are connecting with the church and its nuns and priests all together. And we talk about, power structures and stuff like that, and the inherent misogyny of the church. And there's a kind of a power swap, and it's funny and great. I really loved it, but it's like, I can't make this. It's absurd. I'm not going to raise money for this, and we can't do this. So I shared it with Andrew. We all both liked the script a lot. It's got some beautiful things in it. And I probably spent, 3 weeks writing that. I will bang out a script very quickly when I'm inspired.
Wow.
And a lot of people think that I write a script in 2 weeks and that's it. That's not even remotely the case. I am rewriting constantly, trying to get as many iterations, as many drafts of the script as possible before we start shooting. Always the case. So, I might bang out a first draft in 10 days but then I'll spend months rewriting it.
Right.
So I think when I decided to scale everything down and make it way more intimate, just make it about these 2 priests who lost their other priest, the head priest, Father Brooks. When I decided to change it and make it like that, I think I probably spent another, 2 weeks writing the first draft. And then, another week polishing it, shared it with Kevin Corrigan, shared it with the other actors. When we got the cast, we'd have a reading. And then after the reading, I would continue to rewrite as we pursued funding, as we got into pre-production. So I'm guessing March 15th, middle of March, Ides of March through
2020, right?
2020.
Right after the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, through July of 2020, April, May, June, July, about 4 months of working on the script. You know what I mean? Because I would rewrite, we would do readings, we would discuss things. People would throw me ideas. Andrew Shemin was indispensable. All the actors were indispensable for giving input to what the themes of the script should be and what actually should happen in the script. The Paul Reiser scene, when we cast him, we did 11 drafts of his scene. Paul Reiser is an incredible writer himself. So, and he's stubborn for good reason. He's brilliant. He's been working in the industry for, 40 years. So he was very, very, stubborn about what he wanted. And so we'd have disagreements here and there, but we got those pages written, and I think he's fantastic. So, he co-wrote a lot of his, he wrote a lot of his scene. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Andrew Shemin and I would go back and forth with emails. I don't know a lot about the Bible. I don't know a lot about religion. And he is a polymath. He's brilliant. He's a genius. So we would go back and forth with long emails where I was basically Paul. Yeah. I would ask a ton of questions, and Andrew would give me answers. And I would use kind of our emails to structure some of the more technical stuff in the movie. Andrew Shemin himself.
The dueling scripture scene blew me away with Father Andrew kind of back and forth with Father what's his name?
Oh, Father James. Yeah,
Father James. They're
Father
just
James,
throwing quotes, Bible quotes, back and forth at each other. Yeah, I was like, boy, this director and writer really knew his Bible stuff.
Yeah, but something there's it's so easy now. You can cheat so easily. You go to Google and you type up what are the 50 best Bible verses, or 50 Bible verses about faith or about fear. You know what I mean? And you go through and you pick them. I feel like it's a lot easier to sound smart or be erudite with Google now. You know what I mean? Right. Because you're just if you're good at searching for things. I mean, we don't do that throughout the movie, but on something like that, where we're we got to get some great Bible verses. Of course, I don't think Shemin, I could have gone to Shemin and said, what are some great Bible verses about fear and whatnot? But, we didn't always, he didn't, whatever, sometimes he would provide specific things and sometimes not. But yeah, also, too, I don't remember, but I'm sure that exchange of Bible verses, I've seen that in movies before. I mean, what's truly original these days? We're all borrowing, stealing, that kind of thing, appropriating. But I've seen it somewhere before. I remember years ago, I remember thinking, oh, man, two people are trading Bible verses. So I'd love to be able to take credit. I mean, who can take credit for anything these days? Everything is, we're extrapolating from every conversation we've had, every film we've seen, every song we've listened to. But, you try to be original. You try to do something interesting, and hopefully you can execute it well. And at the end of the day, when you've got Thomas J. Ryan and Kevin Corrigan going back and forth, it's easy to execute it. They're doing all the work.
They made it look easy. Yeah, my painting teacher in college said artists feed off of each other, and that's so true. At least for me in my art. I mean, everything I do is inspired by something. You start with imitation and try to make it original somehow, make it your own. And I was, what I was impressed with this film is I went in pretty skeptical because I'm a former Catholic. I grew up Catholic, and I see the Catholic Church, and I don't know. I have my own baggage that I bring to a film like this, and also it's not. It's clearly the title of the film. It's not an action film. This is not a zombie film or something. So I'm like, okay, what am I getting myself into here? But compared to your prior work, you have this almost farcical approach to films, sometimes in the comedy and the timing and the delivery of the lines and the storylines and the characters. Hilarious. A lot of great comedy that you've done, and also compelling, controversial, very original stuff. So I was not expecting Scenes from an Empty Church to be almost like a solid mainstream drama. I mean, slash comedy. I mean, there's I've heard it described as a spiritual comedic journey. And I think another podcaster said that about this film, but it was just a really nice change in tone. And I don't know if it's just a new stage in your artistic journey where you're looking at storytelling a little differently, but I was just really impressed with how great this film was from the standpoint of the relationships. Like, this is not about the Catholic religion necessarily. Just like The Walking Dead is not necessarily about zombies. You know, it's about relationships. And this is not about necessarily, priests are in the movie and they're characters, but you really get deep into who these people are. What you're doing is you're exposing the humanity of every character in this film, good and bad. With Craig Bierko's character, the sinner, you're just kind of jarred by seeing his humanity or lack thereof. And with these priests, you see how human they are. And it's just it's a wonderful, heartwarming, funny, charming story that was very enjoyable. I'm not saying that that's unexpected, but just the tone of the film compared to your prior work surprised me.
Yeah, I was inspired to make something a little bit more dramatic just because we were all going through COVID collectively, and it felt redundant to be cynical, which I normally am very cynical, and to be to lash out or to complain or to say this is what's wrong, this is why this happened. Like, it was like, let's make something that's hopeful because that seemed like it was needed, and that's just what. I don't kind of fight whatever I'm feeling. I just kind of write whatever I'm feeling. And it felt like the right thing to do. There were times where I tried to make the script a little bit more absurdist or even a little darker at times, or more absurdist, because that's and very much funnier at times, because that's kind of how I respond to fear of death, fear of the unknown, fear of everything. You talk about anxiety about names. I have anxiety about everything. And thus it comes out as mocking everything, because that is my way of being able to deal with it. That's my therapy, making fun of everything. Right. And I had some of that in the script, a lot more actually. And again, the actors who really respected the material and what we were trying to do, they helped me strip that stuff away. They thought it kind of trivialized the movie a little bit, especially in the Craig Bierko scene. The Craig Bierko scene was a lot more comical and absurdist in earlier iterations of it. And everyone said, look, this thing is going to play. It shouldn't play funny. We should play it straight. Don't make it so jokey. Strip out the joke. I mean, at the end of the day, putting jokes in a movie is very self-indulgent. You know what I mean? If you have the audience's attention, and I just think the Craig Bierko scene is just one of the most just startling and shocking, and it has a lot to say about the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, the hypocrisy of salvation. I think it's beautiful and brilliant. And because of everybody's involvement, I think the whole film is that way. I'm really proud of the movie. But I was just responding to what we were going through. You know what I mean? And also listening to everybody's input. As I've gotten older, there's a sense of like, okay, I've said a lot of stuff in my movies, and it's like, from my point of view, my skewed point of view of being a 49-year-old single man who is afraid of relationships and maybe afraid of commitment and wants to commit to his own artistic pursuits. I think I maybe said everything I have to say about that stuff, So now as I get older, it's like I don't have kids from which to inform a new perspective. You know what I mean? That's like, so I have to listen more to the people, if they will give me input, if I can share my scripts and they'll give me ideas and they'll allow me to use some of those ideas. I mean, if you're writing scripts very quickly, you have to just listen to the input of people. You know what I mean? Like, if I was spending 4 or 5 years on this, that was seriously researched and I was really delving into it, that's another matter. But because we're making these things quickly, it's like we want the script to be as good as we can possibly get it. And what the fuck do I know? From my very limited, point of view, I have to open it up. So, and that's what I've been doing. That's what I'm going to be doing in the future, is kind of trying to like make a writer's room of sorts, you know what I mean, and giving people credit, you know what I mean, for helping with the story or with the script when necessary.
Paul Reiser, yeah.
Absolutely, Paul Reiser. I asked Paul. I said, Paul, do you want? I'll give you a script writing credit on this. He's like, no, I don't want my name to. You know, you just maybe because WGA stuff. You know, like he's in the Writers Guild. But you know, my mother died about 6 months ago, which is sad and terrible, and it was very sad. But I feel like it's changed me too. I do want to make movies that are. I want to make a movie about my mom. I want to make a movie about what she meant to me. I want it to be funny. I want it to be ridiculous. I also want it to be, you know, sad. I want it to be about my grieving process. I think I do want to do that. I'm working on a novel. My mom is in the novel. She has to be there. I want to bring her back in some way. I mean, it's a horror novel, so something terrible happens to her at the end, but like in a comic, it's a comical way. I love her, but you know, she has to die in the book. So I feel like as I get older, I don't want to spin my wheels. I don't want to repeat myself. And then the movie I'm going to make in this winter is going to be kind of similar to Summer of Blood in the sense of horror comedy, because Summer of Blood was a very funny, I think, absurdist vampire film, and I want to make an absurdist slasher film about the current cultural climate. And but I feel like it's a very low budget film, and I feel like it's just been festering inside of me since being something very positive with scenes from an empty church, very abstract and weird with the French movie that's coming out. It's like, well, I need to say this particular thing about this particular subject matter. And which is it's extremely asinine and absurd. Hopefully it's smart, you know, absurdist and smart. But after that, it's like, okay, if I keep making movies, I would like to make something that's extremely dramatic or straight or a children's movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I definitely want to go in that vein because those things are what makes it all interesting and fun. You know, the beautiful thing about making a movie every year or two is that it's always a new experience. I kind of compare it to like having a startup company and getting investors and creating a startup. And, you know, it's fun. Sometimes a startup is successful. Most of the time it's not, for at least for me. But every year we get to try it again. And so what makes making movies fun and interesting and curious is the chance to go in new territories.
Right.
And so that is the goal and the hope is to use whatever grief I experienced or whatever memories I have of my mother or whatever else is the next phase, a post-COVID phase, or maybe a phase where it's about music or just playing music or making an album or writing a novel. I want to keep making movies, but at the same time, there are different chapters. And it's like, okay, maybe it's time to focus on something else for a while, you know?
So I've followed a lot of artists on social media and I've talked to a lot of artists since the pandemic began. I was covering Sundance as a member of the press in January of 2020, right when the pandemic was hitting. And so I transitioned into talking to artists sort of, you know, that contrast before and after of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic was very stark. And what I picked up on was artists responded in two different ways. One, they shut down creatively because they just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with whatever was happening in the world and also their internal world. They just couldn't keep those two things going at the same time. You, however, right after the pandemic started, leaned into whatever was happening and folded it into your creative process immediately. Same thing with the death of your mother. And my condolences, by the way. I lost my father, and losing a parent is never easy. But you use that just like you did with the pandemic, fold it into your creativity, start writing a novel, and turn that into something creative. Where do you think that comes from?
For me, I feel like I don't want to say this as a way of like trying to get sympathy or anything like that. I feel like I'm generally a pretty decent guy. I think I'm maybe a little selfish at times and I'm a little self-indulgent. I want to be a little bit more humane and a little bit more giving and generous. But, you know, I kind of, there's this kind of existential crisis that I'm always in. I don't want to sound pretentious. You can call me out on this, which is like, life is meaningless. There's no point, especially since my mother died. But even before that, it's like I hate myself and feel like I'm a bad person and I put up a good front. I'm around friends. I can be funny when I'm drinking. I can make jokes and then I can make people feel good. And I genuinely like that. I like people and I like being around people. But I also have this just like sadness, man, that it's like I don't talk about a lot. But when I'm making something, it might be as simple as the endorphins that are released. When I'm making something, all the dread goes away momentarily. Like as I'm writing a song or as I'm working on something or drawing a picture and writing a script and finishing a script, I just feel I hate myself a little less, than I normally do when I'm making work. And whatever meaning there is to life or there's not, I think for me personally, my work has meaning to me. Like for better or worse, if no one cares, it's like, I finished something, I accomplished something. I just feel like creating something has value, whether or not it's out in the world. And I've always just gotten a lot of joy from it. It's one of the few things besides drinking, and you can't do that forever. And you can't do that every day, or you shouldn't at least. But creating art every day gives me the caffeine that I need, for the spiritual caffeine that I need, to feel good about myself. And I've gotten to the point where if I'm not making something creatively, I feel guilty. I feel bad. I have a really hard time just not working because maybe I don't know what it is. I didn't always have it. I was always kind of creative, but I wasn't like a workhorse, insane person that like I am now. And I don't want to be. I'd like to and it's not about ambition. I don't care about money. I used to care, you always want people to see your films, your movies to get reviewed, and you want to have success. But now I'm at a point where, I don't care if that happens anymore. It's just about the work. It's about the process. Being around, also too, I love being around people. And when you make films, you are doing something collectively with a group of people. It's like you haven't made a film yet, right? Like you're going to discover for better or worse, be careful what you wish for, the heroine, the fix that comes with that. You know what I mean? Look, you play music, what the fix is all about. The absolute enjoyment you get from that. So it is connected to that. And during the pandemic, I went into overdrive. It was insane. I'm not bragging, but I finished a graphic novel that I've been working on and off for about 15 years that I've set aside 5 years ago. It's like I haven't worked on it for 5 years. And I finished. It's a 250-page graphic novel. I love it. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I can't get it published, and it maybe never get published. But I'm like, I finished it. It's done. Thank God. I wrote a children's book with the director David Gordon Green, who's directing the new Halloween Kills movie. We did an adaptation of the original Halloween. We did an adaptation for children of, it's like a Dr. Seussian, not comparing it to Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seussian type children's book, where we adapted the original John Carpenter's Halloween for a children's book. And it was fun. It's, I think very limited number of copies were made. It exists. We did it. It got published by a new publisher. It's great. We did that, made Scenes from an Empty Church. I'm in this project now with an old friend of mine from Atlanta, Matt Hoffman, and we do this thing where I've been friends with him since college, right? 30 years ago. We went to college together. He got me playing guitar. He bought a guitar, showed me how to play a few chords. I was hooked. I started playing. We've been in a healthy competition ever since. Back in college, it was about who could charm the women and make them all laugh. And I was like, well, he's got a guitar now. I need to get one too, because I can't let him steal the limelight, right? So we're doing this thing now since January where I'll write a song and he'll write a song and we'll record it. And it'll be a gnarly kind of, kind of a sloppy song. And every 2 weeks, every fortnight, we share the song with each other. And we critique each other's songs, and this is not grand delusions of grandeur, trying to be rock stars or folksy. It's like just doing it just because I'm like, he's going to listen to my song, I'm going to listen to his song. We've always been pretty good songwriters. Whatever, relative, you know what I mean? And it's been great. Here we are. We're in September, end of September. I think we're on song 17 now. We've had 17 songs each. And when the year is up, we're going to find the 10 or 12 best songs that each of us have done. We're going to re-record them and we'll have an album, for posterity.
Oh,
Not
that's
because we
awesome.
think something's going to happen, but every week it's like we don't know what the song's going to be like, what it's going to sound like. Every couple of weeks there's different themes, different there's different voices start coming out. Like we have different styles, like that like out of the 17 or so songs, he'll have 3 or 4 different styles that he's starting to kind of figure out, and they're starting to blossom. I've got about 2 or 3 different styles of music, different voices that come out, as you know, with music. And it's just exciting to discover all that. Like the act of painting on a canvas, it goes with it's all painting on a canvas. And that act of discovery, oh man, like what a rush, you know what I mean? And it's just beautiful. I feel like honored and grateful that I still want to do it. My biggest fear is, that's always been the fear of having kids too. It's just like, if I had kids, I'm like, if I'd want them to have good things, I'd have to work to make a living, to make sure that they're provided for. I wouldn't want there to be stress regarding that. But
right.
Oh man, if I wanted to keep making creative stuff and I wouldn't be able to do that, the misery I think that I might be going through, I don't know. I might need medication to get through it. You know what I mean?
You might make your kids miserable too. I mean,
yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the reasons I've avoided getting married is that I think, look, it's a lot to put a woman through. You know what I mean? Me dealing with me. I've dated women, and I think I've inspired them, and I'm still really best friends with my ex-girlfriend of 7.5 years. And as much as I think I've been a positive influence on her, I've put her through some emotional, but she's an artist too. And if that's part of it, like it's sadness is, I think, part of the disposition of being a human being, but it's definitely part of, I think it's part of the fuel of an artist. I think that's why during COVID, there's a great book. I don't know if you've ever read, called Against Happiness. I talk about this book all the time.
Mm-mm.
These rules apply during COVID for me. Against Happiness, Eric Wilson wrote the book. I've read it 3 times. I don't read a lot of self-help books. And this isn't really a self-help book. It's more, it's a poetic polemic on the nature of sadness and melancholy, and how melancholia is a source for creation a lot of times. We're all going to be sad. We're never going to get through sadness. Don't medicate it. Some people need to be medicated, obviously, if there's a physiological problem. But as an artist, sadness can be great fuel, to create from. And I think during COVID, for me, maybe that's just it. The simple answer is, I'm a sad person who maybe doesn't act sad on the surface, but I have a sadness. And during COVID, it really felt like, oh God, to get through all this, I need to work and get through it. I feel lucky in that regard. I know a lot of people who were not productive, and I remember trying to convince them, you've got to do this. It'll make you feel better. But yeah, people are different,
So going back to, I can't help but make the connection to your, between your comment about not wanting to have children and the Room 104 episode with Josephine Decker.
Oh yeah.
Where that's the entire episode. Not to give it away if people haven't seen it yet, but I mean, that's the main theme throughout the episode. Was your personal view of children and not wanting children part of the equation there, or was that just coincidence?
Well, Josephine, I remember when she was making that, she was wanting to have a child very badly. She was wanting to find someone to have a child with. I can't remember if I was part of that conversation ever. We might have joked about it, because she and I are close friends. We were close. We don't talk. When we see each other, it's like great friends. We don't talk to each other that often. I love her greatly, and I've always been kind of in love with her in a lot of ways. And she kind of knew. But I think Josephine knew my attitudes about just through my movies too, Summer of Blood and Richard's Wedding and Applesauce. There's kind of a jocular fear of those kind of commitments. And she's always known that I've been playfully against all that stuff, while she was wanting to have a kid at the time. And she and I just have a comfortable rapport. And so when she came to me, I think there was this idea of you'd be perfect for playing the husband who doesn't want to have kids, because I know how you are already. I know your disposition and your aversion to it. So yeah, I think she may have picked me because of that. Yeah, for sure, and also because we're close, and she was comfortable with me, and I'm comfortable with her, and so, yeah. But and we co-wrote She had the whole story and the outline kind of figured out, and then we both did a pass of the script. She wrote the first draft. I did a pass of the script. She'd do another pass of the script where she basically ripped out all the stuff that I put in there. She left a few of those things in there. But yeah. It was a nice, beautiful, amazing project. I had a lot of fun doing that with her. I tried to talk her out of casting me because I had imposter syndrome, and I was like, Josephine, you need to find a real actor whose name means something. And she's like, no, I want you. And I was flattered, and it was amazing. And I'm always trying to get out of acting gigs. So when people cast me, I'm always shocked that people cast me. I think I'm really good at playing my own personality with dialogue that I've written. I think I'm pretty good about that. But when it comes to acting somebody else's dialogue, but we improv. I mean, we had the script, but we improv the hell out of that, So.
Yeah. Well, you have a charisma, and I don't know if anyone's ever brought this up, but you have like a Zach Galifianakis.
Oh yeah, people have said that. Yeah,
charisma.
He's from he's from North Carolina.
I know that.
Very close to where I grew up. Like he's from Wilkesboro, which is very, very close to where I grew up.
That's cool. Yeah, but you have this charisma on camera and a way of delivering. Like I look at the robbery scene in the Bing Rames short as like a perfect example of how in a very short period of time you can go from charming to very dark to charming again, and just this seamless transition, and also be hilarious at the same time. So I think your acting is great, but
thank you.
Maybe you're being hard on yourself.
I appreciate it. What we're trying to do with this new movie in the fall is we're trying to be really, really dark, but we're going to try to find a way to be extremely hopeful in the darkest of times. Making Scenes from an Empty Church, it's definitely I turned a corner. I don't want to make something that's so bleak that there's not a glimmer of hope. You know what I mean? And with Scenes from an Empty Church, we definitely didn't want to make a movie that glorified the Catholic Church without, holding it to task a little bit and challenging it a little bit, which is what the second half of the movie is, which I think is a beautiful way to challenge some of the aspects of the Catholic Church without being disrespectful. We didn't want to be disrespectful. We wanted to address again child abuse, which is the Craig Bierko character, without being on the nose about it.
Exactly. That's what I like. That's what I like. Because as much as the Catholic Church is an easy target, easy targets are not interesting or compelling to me. So that's what was so cool about it is you humanize this aspect of the Catholic Church in a way that it just created, and I hate to use the word mainstream because I don't know if that's an insult to you, but
no. There's wonderful stuff on mainstream. I mean, there's great, brilliant stuff on mainstream.
Yeah, it just felt like this is actually like a Hollywood studio film. That's what it felt like.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Not that executives were, changing things that shouldn't have been changed, but it's just like felt like, wow, this actually has a lot of substance to it, and maybe the best way to put it is broad appeal. I think this is going to appeal to a lot of people as opposed to like the mumblecore movement, which is very specific,
I have so many on Facebook, so many old friends from Taylorsville, North Carolina, who are still very, very strong Christians, right? And Baptists. And I thought, I assumed that I was trying to make a movie that I thought they would enjoy, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That was never that tried to challenge them a little bit, that was never disrespectful. I just don't, look, most people are good people. Most preachers are good people. Most, Muslims and Christians and Republicans are good people. You know what I mean? Like, and Democrats. I mean, most are good. They're decent. We all want the same thing. When I made The Misogynist, I remember thinking the exact same thing. It was like, I could go after, people that I disagree with politically, but it's like, that is an easy target. Like The Misogynist was going after kind of everybody, I made this movie called The Misogynist, and the idea was I'm going to go after the things I love, which is, progressive politics or liberalism. I don't know if I love liberalism. Progressiveness, I think is always good. And I disagree with Republicans, and I wanted to skewer them a little bit, but it was mainly, it's an easy target for if you're a left-leaning person, the right's easy target. Bit harder to go after the things to be self-deprecating, to go after the things that you love, It's not hard for me. I've always been self-deprecating. That's the thing about the South. the South has always been a very, very, very good at like mocking themselves, making fun of themselves, like maybe because the humility of losing the Civil War. I don't know what it all, it comes from, but there's, yeah, for sure. So
yeah, that's funny. The Misogynist, I intended to watch it, and then I read the synopsis, and it literally just triggered me because it brought me back to
Oh
election
no, a
night.
lot of people listen. Also, too, going back to the mainstream of the church movie, I think the church movie is very accessible to people, but also it might be too soon. And a lot of people living through COVID are like, I don't want to experience COVID right now. Definitely, when the Misogynist came out, the idea was like, we're living through the Trump nightmare. I might say this. I don't want to disrespect you if you're not a Trump supporter, I'm assuming, right? Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
very left
Because
guy.
we're living through the nightmare. I don't want to be reminded of it. This is way too soon. Maybe it'll be appreciated later on, and maybe the church movie too. The New York Times, when they reviewed Scenes from an Empty Church, they gave us a very dismissive review, as if we were being irresponsible by making a movie during COVID. And by making a movie about COVID, they called it redundant, And listen, I can't disagree with I think the movie should be seen. Actually, I thought the movie should be that kind of movie you watch that would almost be like comforting, you know what I mean? To let you know, listen, things are going to be all right. We're all living through this. I remember when COVID started, I guess last year, there was that Steven Soderbergh movie about I can't remember the name of it now. Jesus Christ. But it's about like a pandemic that happened. This movie was about 10 or 12 years ago. And Kate Winslet's in it. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Outbreak, but I think it might be one word, if you can look that up. And this movie is, oh my God, the global pandemic that happens in this movie is horrific. Millions and millions and millions of people are dying. And there's chaos in the streets, and the foundation of structure of capitalism falls apart. I mean, like, the streets are filled with debris, the whole fabric of it's like martial law, basically. But then everything does start to fix itself and start to get better because of whatever, the vaccine. And I remember watching that movie, and I was comforted watching it. It was shocking and a little scary. I guess it was made in 2010. Rooney Mara is in it. Kate Winslet. I can't fucking remember the name of the movie.
So it was Steven Soderbergh?
Soderbergh directed it, yeah. Look at what he directed in 2010, 8, 2004.
I'm looking at it. He's producing. Gosh, he's got so many credits. Contagion,
right.
Yeah, that's it.
So I remember watching that, and it was like comforting. And everybody was watching. A lot of people were watching it at the time. So that kind of contradicted this idea that it's too soon. We're all going through it. We shouldn't watch it. But, I think it's a lovely movie. And we were trying to make something that was accessible to a lot of people, that Catholics would appreciate, non-believers would appreciate. As you were saying, it's not a movie necessarily about religion. It's a movie about people, humanity, about being in the same room with people, the importance of the soul versus the body, like all these different aspects, things that are, there's a lot of crossover, whether or not you're devout Christian or the Bible. These are all elements that we can relate to. And again, I mean, it's not the deepest movie in the world, and it's not supposed to, because it's it's not a movie for polymaths or intellectuals. It's a movie for everyone, and I
don't think it's too soon at all, because I don't think that even today people have processed the trauma, the collective trauma that we've all gone through.
Yeah.
The isolation, the quarantine, experiences. Everybody's quarantine experience was different, but I found it really refreshing to actually see the trauma being processed in real time during the pandemic, and knowing that there was actually a pandemic going on at the time. So you're sort of like trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. How are they doing this?
And to see, sorry to interrupt. Finish your thought. See people also too engaging in conversations and moments of joy and humanity while it's all happening. We're not all just cloistered by ourselves, shivering, saying, "This is terrible. What's going to happen?" We need people. We need to see each other. We need to share life and share our views and share our fears, and also share optimism for the future. I mean, that was definitely what we were trying to do.
What was the thought process about the scene with the soul? Because that's the one scene that kind of turned the movie in a different direction, that made it perhaps more of an art film at that point. But what were your thoughts about that scene? Did you have any trepidation about including it? And what was the creative process like for saying, yes, we need this scene. And I really loved it, by the way. So,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I'm glad that
That's
you
one of my favorite
included
scenes
it.
in the movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Well, I mean, from the marketing standpoint, you could say, well, we need a big special effects scene to put in the trailer so that so they'll have a reason to watch it. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not what the way it was designed. Although I'm always trying to work in a couple of special effects in movies if I can, if they're justified, if they're not forced.
Yeah.
I guess the idea of knowledge and being privy to knowledge maybe that you don't maybe necessarily want to have. Like, it's better to have the mystery. Like, if someone was going to tell me my future or how long I was going to live to be, the last knowledge that I want, you know what I mean? If I found out I was going to live to be, I don't want to. I just don't want to know. I'm scared of psychics. I'm scared of the idea of some certain knowledge I don't want. So the idea was the foundation of belief, Catholicism or Christianity, or maybe any kind of a lot of structured religion, is this idea of the afterlife. If we knew that we could continue, it would be easy to have faith. You know what I mean? If we knew that 100%, if we knew there was an afterlife, it would be easy to. There is no faith. If there's, it's hard to put into words because the idea is, thinking that knowledge will grant you wisdom and happiness, and the opposite happens when Paul finds out that I don't know. It doesn't prove that he has a soul. It could be just an energy source. You know what I mean? And the idea was playing around with the idea of knowledge and what is real and not real, misinformation. What you think you know is not what you know. Once you learn something, you realize you don't know anything, even more so. You know what I mean? I feel like as I get older, the dumber I get and the less that I know. You know what I mean? And that's that might have been, at the end of the day, just the kind of the catalyst, the seed was, we don't know anything. And science can pose the discovery of one thing just poses a whole new set of questions. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not saying we don't know anything. Of course, there's absolute importance of science. I feel like an idiot talking about this stuff because it was a very abstract and weird nebulous thing. That's what the soul is. And it's funny, when I wrote the scene and I talked about it with my CGI, and now I'm avoiding the question altogether. My CGI is like, oh, this sounds like, my CGI guy is like, oh, I read the scene. It sounds like astral projection. This gets an astral projection scene. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that is. What is astral projection? And he told me because he's fascinated by it, Right. But if we have an energy source that keeps going, like for me, the only thing I could get behind, not the only thing, in an ideal world, I would love that as sentient beings, we go on in the afterlife and I can talk to you and we can have another conversation. And 300 years from now, and I run into you somewhere on a grassy hill and we see each other. It's like, it's good to see you again. Oh my God, I haven't seen you in 100 years and we're still alive. It's great. Hard to imagine that, but that would be a nice comforting thought. And the idea that we still remain who we are and that we can take it with us, our personalities or who we are. Which is a whole other host of implications that come with that. Because is it nature versus nurture? When our souls are born, do we already have that? Do we already have that when our souls enter a body? Do we already have our personalities? This is absurd. You're a Catholic. You can say, look, I'm spinning my wheels here. The bottom line is, I don't know what I was trying to say. The idea that we're energy sources, that when we die, we might fly into the stratosphere and join this torque of energy that is the universe. Okay, sure, maybe that's a possibility, and maybe that's all the electricity that runs the world, and maybe that's who we are. We're just a torque of energy. That's not comforting because whatever. I want to be someone. I want to be an individual. Part of my whole MO of making films and everything is not getting married. It's like retaining my individuality. But then again, if I'm such a self-absorbed narcissistic asshole, why? I should have kids to keep it going because I think the world deserves. I don't know. It's a whole idea of things, Obviously, I'm not. I feel like so caffeinated and worked up right now. I know I'm giving you no answer here. I apologize.
No, it's a great answer because if there is no concise, easy way to put it, then it's just organically felt right at the time,
Yeah.
and it worked. And I think it's a great scene. I forget her name. I love the actress who was spraying the perfume, and
Oh,
she,
Ava Dora Paul. Yeah, put her in a
yeah,
lot of movies. She's in my French movie coming out. She's in Blackmagic for White Boys. She's in Catfight. I love her. I'll put her in everything that I can. She's fantastic. She's a Dutch actress. She's really, really wonderful. I tend to write from a place of not quite from a mysterious place, and not quite knowing why I'm doing it or where it's coming from. I feel like if I know too much about it, it takes the fun out of it. You know what I mean? It
hmm
demystifies it a little bit. Now, obviously, I do know once you start rewriting, things make sense. The themes come out. But I guess in the first drafts, I don't want to intellectualize or to think about it too much because I'm like, I don't know. I like the sense of mystery and discovering something about myself and the way I view the world or whatever the universe has brought me as I'm writing. Not to be too romantic. I believe there is. I don't know. You're pulling from something. I like to be surrounded by books. I think you can pull from everything around you. You know what I mean?
hmm
So yeah, I feel like you could say, hey, the universe is writing this, but sometimes it feels like it is. Like God, having a really great dream with a complex, amazing dream, and you're like, this is brilliant. And I'm not smart enough to have this dream. You know what I mean? That's also kind of talked about in Richard Linklater's Waking Life. Which is like, where is this coming from? I don't. I'll read a script sometimes that I've written and been like, I'm not smart enough to have written that. Obviously, I'm pulling from somewhere. I'm stealing from somewhere.
Yeah.
But if I have to think about it too much, that's the thing about comedy too. If you force the joke, if you think about the joke too much, sometimes it feels like obviously you're trying to work it in there. It
hmm
just kind of comes. You play. So are you a songwriter too?
Yeah, I write songs.
So
Yeah.
pretty often?
No, not often enough. I'm so busy with work and family that I make that my excuse for not
Yeah, yeah.
writing as much as I should anyway.
Well, but I feel for me personally, I just feel like if the song doesn't come relatively easy, at least the first kind of the basic foundation of it, you know what I mean? I feel
Right.
like it's not really there. If I have to think about it too much,
Right. I
and
think some of the best songs were written, in a matter of minutes or hours as
yeah,
opposed
or at
to,
least the
days
structure,
or weeks.
the chords, and the basic foundation of what the basic core of the song, very
Right.
quickly. Inspiration comes from nowhere. That's why you have to have a pad by your bed or something to dictate while you're driving. Record your ideas with because these ideas
Exactly.
just come from you
Yeah.
don't even know. They pop in there, and
They're
it's
ephemeral.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. Ephemeral, great word, absolutely. And they're beautiful and it's like again, being grateful that I still want to do it, that I still can do it. I always get scared before I start writing, thinking, what if this is the time that just doesn't happen,
hmm
Just words don't come, or I'm thinking about it too much, or I've lost my nerve. Because I lost my nerve making movies for a decade, and it's like, I can't believe I didn't make movies for 7, 8 years. And anyway, you're gonna
Well, I was going to anecdotally tell you about a prior guest who is a songwriter. Her name is Sue Ennis, Sueennis. And if you want to check her out, she has a website, but she has workshops and she will do one-on-one Zoom sessions with you for writing songs. And she wrote a lot of the heart songs. So,
oh
like
wow, cool.
Barracuda and,
Yeah,
Magic Man and Crazy on You and Dog.
amazing. Yeah.
I think she wrote Dog and Butterfly too. And I don't know if she wrote all of those songs that I just listed off, but she was instrumental to writing a lot of the heart songs and lives in Seattle. But if you are interested in the the formulaic sort of structure of songwriting, because there are building blocks of songs that I'm discovering
Mhm.
for how to put together a song. And it's very similar to probably how to write a joke, if you're a comedian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she's just a genius at that. So if you want to check her out,
Oh yeah,
you
no,
know,
for sure. I just bought a book. I'm afraid of like reading certain books like this because I'm like, whatever process I have for writing a song, it's my own unique process, I guess. I assume. Of course, I'm sure it's not unique, and I got this Jeff Tweedy book about how to write
oh,
one good song, and I'm afraid to read it. My friend Matt Hoffman is reading it. I'm afraid to read it because I'm like, what if I read it and it's like, oh, and it changes how I write music, but at the same time, what it gives me ideas that I need. You know what I mean? Right. Stephen King's On Writing. It's a great book on writing because again, it's just very egalitarian. You know what I mean? It's just like anybody can do it. Don't overthink it. Just do it. You know, that's a process. Everybody should use that process. Don't overthink it. Just let it come. Like we're all
ask plus chair equals writing, right? Isn't that Stephen King?
Is that what it asks?
Ass plus chair equals writing. I think that's what he
like
said.
That. That's good. That's really funny. I like that. It's fantastic. Yeah.
I love that type of simple wisdom, the really pithy wisdom that you get from people like David Mamet. You know, just say the fucking lines.
Yeah.
Just say the fucking lines.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need your, backstory on this character or whatever.
Yeah.
Say the lines I told you, or ass plus chair equals writing. That simplicity really is appealing to me.
Absolutely. Without a doubt, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and my apologies for going so long, but this has been a really compelling conversation. And so I have a couple of random questions for you. Josephine Decker, going back to her, I saw her premiere of Shirley at Sundance and was just blown away by her and this
she's
film.
Very impressive. Yeah.
This film. And you have, like, with the circle of artists that you run with and that you work with frequently, and I assume are your friends, like Kevin Corrigan and Max Casella, and Kevin is like, I've looked at his Instagram. I mean, he's a real artist, like
absolutely,
true, like fucking legit.
He's a genius. Yeah, he's a genius too. Max is too. Max can draw and paint. Kevin draws, paints, plays music, musician, amazing writer. He wrote a series of books that email correspondence with Casella, who is Sun Kim Moon. He's a musician. What's his name? Casella. Kevin is a brilliant writer. Everything. Max Casella the same way. Yeah, those guys are true geniuses for sure.
So you have this circle of folks that you work with and that you create with. How important is that to your personal process, that you're around that type of creativity for inspiration, for bouncing ideas off of? Because I think there's a lot of people out there, my listeners included, who maybe don't have that. They don't have access to that. They're maybe in not as progressive areas. They're not in metropolitan areas. They're, in living in the country where they don't have access to art galleries. And, you're in the belly of the beast in terms of the art world, and you have been for the last 10 years. So what are your thoughts on how important that is to you and how others might be able to mirror that type of, recreate that type of experience of being around creatives when they geographically or for other reasons just don't? If that makes sense.
Well, living in New York has made a huge difference because it is very competitive. There's a nice, the idea of like keeping up with other people that are making great, compelling work keeps you going. You know what I mean? Like there's always a sense of so-and-so, they got into Sundance, they're having way more success than me. You have to get over that. That's always like crippling. But like, let me just make something, because if I'm making something, I'm still there. I'm still creating a body of work. When I lived in Wilmington, well, there was a scene there. There were people making movies there, but I felt like I was still extremely creative. When I was in Durham, North Carolina for 7 years, that's when I did make movies. There was not a film scene there. And that might have been one of the reasons why I wasn't making films. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So what is the answer there? Move to where people are making films? That's not the answer. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. God, filmmaking has gotten so egalitarian, and making art is anybody can take a canvas and paint on it. Anybody can write a story, and there are artists everywhere you go. I guess you have writers groups, right? If you're a writer, there's tons of musicians where you are in Washington, right? That you play with and whatnot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to answer that, because I'd like to think that if I lived in a cabin in the woods by myself, I would still play music and I would still maybe work on my novel. I don't know if I would make movies, but I would always create because of a need to, just an ineffable desire to create. It's almost hard to put into words. If you're not around, God, I mean, so you're talking about the small town, the folks in small rural places.
Yeah, and that don't have creatives in their family and in their friend network. But they have that desire to create. And I know there's we have Facebook groups that you can get on, and the screenwriting group on Facebook. I'm a member of several of them, but just the connections that you have are so amazing, and you're right there in the city where they are. I'm wondering, for folks that don't have that, is there any way to, have that same inspiration without that close connection like you have to other creatives? And maybe there's no good answer for it. Maybe the answer is you do have to be, you do have to be around those creatives.
Of course, the thing is, you of course, reading books and watching great movies and listening to great music. I mean, you're inspired by the work. That's always good,
Right.
Seeing someone like, the Applesauce brothers or other filmmakers who made low budget things, when you see them making that kind of work, and you're like, I read they did that for $10,000. Mark Duplass made the puffy chair for $10K. I can do that. I think watching things that are that can be actually accomplished, seeing success, watching and reading books that people that have a similar voice than you, that write in the same style, writers that you like, watching movies where that are made for very low budget. If you want to be a filmmaker, and I can make that movie. I love listening to folk singers just to see what someone can accomplish with an acoustic guitar. And I like listening to like Daniel Johnston music. You know what I mean? Like Daniel, the documentary. Did you ever see The Devil and Daniel Johnston?
Yeah.
I mean, his music's so soulful, even though it's crudely played and crudely sung, because it's like, but he's doing so much with just his energy and just his vitality and just
with an off-tune piano. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just like, I listen to that. It gives me confidence to be able to play music. Like, Jesus, I don't sing well and I'm not a great musician, but I can string out some chords and I have a lot of passion. So I would feel like seeing things that people are doing that inspire you, that are in your wheelhouse, that are actually can be accomplished, with novels. There's the thing, reading great novels, it's like you don't need any money to write a novel. You know what I mean? You need resources and friends to get the novel published, obviously, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's all about being inspired and whatever it takes to get inspired. Again, against happiness, this great little 150-page poetic polemic is just gives you permission to use your sadness to create from. It's a salvation. It's a way out. I mean, he's not the first person to have said this, and he's drawing on hundreds of books that have been written over the last centuries and epochs to get to this thesis that sadness, it can be a good thing, that we can be useful. So fuck no, you don't have to be in the metropolitan. Of course, there are amazing artists everywhere you go. Did you ever see Patterson, the movie Patterson?
With Ray Romano.
No, not Ray. No, that's Paddington, which is a great movie too.
Oh, okay.
Patterson is by God damn it! I can't believe
I'm gonna look it up now.
It's a Jim Jarmusch movie with Adam Driver. It's about a poet who lives in Patterson, New Jersey. He's a bus driver.
Yeah.
And the conceit is that there were a lot of great poets that came from Patterson. So maybe that they're making the point for you right there. If there are a lot of great poets there, they kind of influence each other. But every small town there's a couple of weird fringe artists there, right? Who are they're painters. There's a painter everywhere you go. There are musicians. And there's got to, in my hometown of Taylorsville, North Carolina, there's a guy named Daniel who's he's a filmmaker himself, and he reached out to me saying, "Oh my God, there's another filmmaker from Taylorsville. Onur, how are you?" And just being from the same town connected us, right?
Right.
And I tell you, it goes a long way to watch someone's work, track them down, and to tell them how much you like it, because once you flatter them, you know what I mean? The very few fans that I have that reach out to me who want to be filmmakers or whatever, when they reach out to me and they've seen my work and they can talk about it, then they ask me for advice or they want to do a phone call, I'm always willing to talk to them, if they've seen my work, you know what I mean? And if they've flattered me, and it's not all about them, but it endears you to them, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's like, you have access to so many people now. Some artists won't respond. A lot of them will, if they understand if there's any kind of respect for the need of others to express themselves, and if someone is reaching out to you to say, I love your work, and can you watch my short film, and or this and that, it's like, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you have the time, most people will respond. And I think that might be a good rule, is to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to contact people, contact your heroes, or contact people that are doing things similar to what you want to do,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Sorry about that.
Great advice. I mean, that's what I've discovered in this business too, is just, reaching out with a cold email to someone is doable, and it's achievable if you put a personal touch to it, and you show that you know something about their work, that you've done your homework. So you're not just, it's just like with anything that's transactional. Someone asks for something from you, what are you giving them? Like what are you showing them in terms of why they should even respond to your request? But yeah, this has been a fascinating conversation. I would be remiss if I did not ask you what was, I could not find this episode, but apparently you were kicked off the Doug Benson
show. Yeah, twice. I've been kicked off twice.
What happened there?
Well, come on. That's a long, 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 long story. There's the short story that's not that interesting, and there's the longer story with a lot of funny details where, I made an ass of myself twice. But also too, there was a reason why I made an ass of myself. There were hurt feelings. There were people being offended. I just responded the wrong way. The first time I got kicked out of the Doug Benson show, I was invited to a film festival called the Traverse City Film Festival in Michigan. It's fucking Michael Moore's film festival, right? I was showing Summer Blood there in 2014 or 2015. Sorry, I never look at my phone normally, just seeing there's something. So I got invited. As soon as I got off the plane, they said, "You want to be on a podcast? Come be on a podcast." I was like, "Great, I'll be on a podcast." I didn't know who Doug Benson was. I didn't know that it was a live show. I didn't know that he would have 300 people in the audience who were sycophantically, insanely in love with him for good reason. He's funny and he's amazing. Yeah. Are you a Doug Benson fan yourself?
I've seen his comedy. I've seen his documentary. Yeah.
Funny, charming, very, very funny guy. As soon as I got there, I just think it's a regional festival. I think it's just going to be, to us talking in a room. I didn't know we were going to go on a live stage. And then I found out everyone's drinking in the green room and everyone's getting a buzz. And I like to drink and I like to party. And I'm on the show and I'm just a logorrhea. I'm just talking and talking and talking. And I wish Doug would have told me to shut up, because I just kept running my mouth. And I didn't realize that this was going to go streamed to thousands of people, of his fans. And I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know that it was important. It had value, that I was ruining everyone's night on stage. No. I would have kept my fucking mouth shut. I thought this was about me. I thought, oh, you're going to be on a podcast. You're talking about your work. You're talking about yourself. It was absurd. I had no idea going into it, completely ignorant. And stoned, drunk, a buffoon, an idiot. Everybody hated me on that show. There were a couple of people that appreciated my big, big fucking mouth. And eventually, like with 20 minutes left on the show, Doug kicked me off because I was just being so obnoxious. I had no problem. I left the stage. And the next day at the festival, I approached Doug and said, Doug, because I had researched him after the show,
right, and
realized that he's actually, a cultural icon, that like there are people, devotees and people who love him. And I apologized, and I was contrite, and I was effusive, and he was so sweet and like immediately took my apology, and we got stoned together. And I mean, the code of personality is real. He's a very, very sweet, charming guy.
Yeah.
Flash forward a couple of years later, and I'm on the show again, this time with Heache and Sandra Oh.
And talk about Catfight, yeah.
And we're talking about Catfight, and Heache is a mad woman, and we were drinking and we were partying before the show, and we're on the way, and she'd never heard of Doug Benson either. She didn't care, but I'm like, Ann, this time, I got kicked off the show before. Let's have a good time. This is his show. This is the Doug Benson show. Be respectful. Ann could be very surly, and she could be I love Heache so much. I love Sandra Oh too, but Ann she's like me. She's kind of I'm like her, I should say. No one's like Ann No one's like Anne Heche. What am I talking about? On the way to the Upright Citizens Brigade place in LA, where we're going to have the live show. I'm like, Anne, it's the Doug Benson show. We got to behave. She's like, Onur, let me tell you something, motherfucker. When I'm on the show, when I'm on any show, it's the Anne Heche show. So already, like, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be insane. And then, so as soon as we got there, Doug was cool. He came outside, he greeted me. We're smoking a joint. It's all cool. We're like, everything is simpatico. It's fantastic. And, and at some point I'm like, what did you think of the movie, man? Catfight. What do you think? And he's just, the way he said it, it was just so dismissive. He said, oh, I didn't watch it. And it was like a fucking shoestring broke, like a fucking twig snapped. And I'm like, oh, and I got dark. And things got really dark. And I thought, this motherfucker's, hey, listen, I'm no disrespect. Doug Benson's a great guy, but in my sense, my ego, inflated ego, and also being drunk off my ass and now stoned, it's like, we got Sandra Oh and Anne Heche on the show. He should have at least watched the show, but I watched the movie, but I made the same mistake I made the first time. I thought it was all about me again. This time I thought it was about Anne and Sandra and us, our film. And it wasn't. Again, it was about Doug. And that episode is a train wreck. I mean, Anne and I got kicked off the show within 15 minutes. Like, it was just, and then Sandra, she's very professional and amazing, stayed on the show, finished the show. And it was insanity. Listen, I have calmed. I've learned. I've been humbled a lot in the last 4 or 5 years from having failures in my life, career-wise. Nothing humbles you more than the death of one of your best friends or my mom. It's just like the idea of anger and rage, and I'm able to see the selfishness of that, the absolute weakness of being angry. And something about my mom's death is giving me perspective in a new way. I don't know. Maybe it's a lot of things, but getting older, and trying to be less self-important, going through COVID, getting double vax, realizing that you have to do these things for the collective good. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
There's whether or not, I don't know if you're vaxxed or not, you might.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about getting, that vax life.
I fought it for a while because my mother died of a heart attack. She'd been vaxxed a few weeks before. I was having chest pains after she died, maybe from stress. I was terrified of getting vaxxed, and ultimately I was like, well, Jesus Christ, you have to do this. You can't be so selfish. This is absurd,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, a lot of different things. I'm still a selfish prick and self-indulgent, talking here for an hour and 45 minutes or however long we've talked. There's nothing more self-indulgent than that. But I really like that you want to have this discussion, that we're able to talk. I enjoy it because it's, you discover things, meeting new people too. Yeah. And I'd love to talk more about it. Next time we should do this again where I'm interviewing you, because you seem very fascinating and sweet, a big heart. And I guess having 3 daughters and being, the work that you do, which is all about it's altruism and helping people and victims. That's beautiful. That's amazing work. I feel like a dick talking to you. I'm like, you're a good person. I don't feel like one in front of you,
Oh, man, you're very kind to say that. But I will take you up on that invitation. Perhaps when that Cold Dead Look in Your Eyes premieres, we can talk again about that film or this ambitious project that you're talking about, this feature film that you're about to start shooting. And it's obvious that I have really enjoyed this talk, because I normally try to cut it off about an hour, just out of respect for the guest time. But I couldn't help myself but just to keep going here, because
oh man, it was a blast.
We covered a lot of ground. We went pretty deep on some subjects. So I'll let you hop in the shower and get to your next appointment. Onur Tukel, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
This was a real joy and honor. I look forward to talking to you again, and thanks so much for having me. I've had a really great time.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind sharing your email address, I can send you the links to the show when it launches, and just kind of keep you in the loop on that stuff.
Okay, yeah, let me send it to you right now. Hold on one second. I'd love to hear some of your music sometime, and have you finished a script yet? Have you finished any scripts? My rule about reading scripts is I'll only read a script if the plan is to get it made. to make the thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, then I can give you feedback that's actually, I guess I can give feedback that's helpful to become a better writer, but I'm more interested in, like, I want to see something get made. You know what I mean? So
Well,
where they can.
You are so kind to even think about reading a script that I would send you. I promise I will not send you one unless I'm ready to make it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And listen, don't put this on the podcast either. I don't want a lot of people asking me to read scripts.
Okay, no, I won't.
Put that. Actually, you can put that. It's very hard. Like I reading scripts is very, very difficult. But if it could be the thing you're planning to get made. It's like, I'm getting this made, and I have the money to make it. So this is going to get made. I'm making this in 6 months to a year. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'll totally read it, because it's like, this is definitely going to happen. If it were, I'm going to make this, and I'm going to, and I'm going to make it for $2 million, and I'm planning on trying to raise the money, I'm like, chances are it's not going to get made unless you just have $2 million that you can spend on your own movie. Carson,
I just interviewed Carson Mell, who made the movie. He was on Silicon Valley in the writer's room, but he made this movie called Some of Our Stallions, which is great.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, great movie.
And I interviewed him, and he talked about scripts being like reading a recipe for a cake. He's like, I know that the cake tastes good. I don't know, looking at the recipe, if this is going to be good or not.
Yeah,
so
no,
he has a really hard time, seeing in a script whether it's actually a great movie or not.
I'm really good about giving advice about, like, if you're going to try to make something of a certain budget, what needs to be there, what doesn't need to be there, how to consolidate scenes so you have less locations. Just from a practical standpoint, I've gotten pretty good at making micro-budgeted movies, so I think I can give practical advice on how to actually get the movie made. Yeah, it is subjective, so if I don't like a script, I'm not going to tell someone, well, I don't like if it's badly written or there's just mistakes that are like laziness, then I will critique it. But if I'm just not gelling with the script or the story or the characters, it's not up to me to say this doesn't work. It could totally work. You know what I mean? Like, so it's usually, I'm giving, you can put all this stuff in there if you want. I don't mind anything. You don't cut anything out. You don't cut a damn thing out. I'm always saying things like, oh, cut this. I just put my foot in my mouth. There's so many things I've said in the past on podcasts. I was thinking today that could get me canceled, but I'm like, whatever. It's like, this is what it's all about. I mean, that's another whole nother conversation. But I just lost my train of thought now, because now I'm thinking about the shower and that I need to fucking go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well,
I want to think that I'm like totally like my train of thought. But no, I was thinking about the script writing process, and it's like, oh shit, I lost my train of thought again. Listen, you're a beautiful man. This was a really, really, really fun conversation.
It was great. Thanks for taking time to share your story. Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreamPathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.